House.
Madam Speaker.
Madam Speaker. Oh.
I don't know who came up. Gentleman from Anne Arundel.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I've said many times that I'm fond of most of you, and I mean that sincerely, especially the Speaker, but even the Chairman of Judiciary, and I appreciate everybody's work here, but I have to tell you, in my time in Annapolis, this is one of the bills that I find to be the most concerning. First of all, the arguments that are raised about the colonists and quartering in our homes had nothing to do with firearms. It had to do with food. The British were trying to make the colonists pay for a war that they did not support. It had to do with the violation of privacy. And in many instances, the British troops used the colonists' home and property to enforce British law that the colonists were rebelling against. It had nothing to do with firearms. The Supreme Court case that resulted in the expansion of access to carry permits in Maryland was a wonderful restoration of civil rights. Under the Bill of Rights, the restored access to the Second Amendment and the right to self-defense to Marylanders who had been wrongly denied for far too long by this state legislature. The right to self-defense also discriminated for decades in this state. This legislature, under the leadership of our lovely Speaker, has fought hard to lift people up. But the law that we had in Maryland as it relates to carry permits has discriminated against thousands of Marylanders. Think about it. Two perfect people with perfect backgrounds, but one's the landlord and one's the renter. Under existing Maryland law, the landlord has access to a firearm and a carry permit, but the renter does not. That's discrimination. It has been concerning to see the hand-wringing and fretting about the Supreme Court decision to restore rights to all Americans. Some called it dangerous, and in the dissent, Justice Breyer stated, the consequences of gun violence are borne disproportionately by communities of color, and black communities in particular. I agree. And I think it's immoral to deny civil rights to these communities as Maryland's law did for decades. So good on you, Supreme Court, for restoring rights blinded by anything other than someone's background and legal status to own a firearm. You can find countless examples of where good guys and gals with permit holders protect themselves and others with the lawful use of a firearm. Just last year, hailed as a hero, a legal firearm owner with a carry permit stopped a mass shooter in an Indianapolis mall. He was just 22, by the way. Thank God he was there. The police said that the gunman had 2 rifles, a handgun, and more than 100 rounds of bullets. He fired 24 rounds from one of the rifles before he was killed by a hero with a carry permit. This bill before us effectively bans this hero from being there to save lives. In West Virginia, at a graduation party, the police spokesman says, a woman's quick thinking saved lives and likely prevented a mass shooting. Some bad guy showed up and opened fire from his vehicle at this graduation party outside the apartment complex. Fortunately, this Good Samaritan put her life on the line and saved dozens of lives. Friends, carry permit holders do a lot of good too. They save a lot of lives. And I'll argue are among the safest people among us to do that type of thing. Think about it. Under this bill, if you're at a movie theater, a church, a synagogue, a restaurant, a grocery store, there's going to be a lot more environments where good guys and gals with firearms aren't going to be allowed to carry. But if one of these bad guys intended to kill you and came in to try to kill you and others, Wouldn't you want that good guy and gal with a carry permit and training and fingerprinting to be there to potentially save your life, your kids' lives, your neighbors' lives? As someone who has a carry permit, I can tell you it's the last thing I ever want to do is have to use that firearm. But I will be damn glad to do it to protect my life, my children's life, and most of yours. However, I tell you, if I were confronted with that situation, I wouldn't want to do it, but I would do it for you, all of you, because I believe that life is worth protecting. This bill disarms the good guys and good gals who have the legal training and right prior to the passage of this bill. And I think that's a shame. I think it's a shameful thing to do. And it's not just my feelings. We often get caught up in our feelings around here. It's not just my feelings. The data says this bill is stupid, it's bad, it's wrong, it's even deadly. And let me tell you why. The data shows that since 2020, people legally carrying a firearm have stopped at least 31 mass shootings. Not our beloved state troopers and police and sheriffs. Thank God some other do-gooders were there and stopped 31 mass shootings. The data also shows that in America, where people are allowed to legally carry, they stop about half the active shootings attempted in this country. 50% are stopped by good guys and gals with a carry permit. This bill will make it so that those people will not be there to protect others. This is data. This is facts. I want to remind you that the data also shows that just the deterrent of somebody maybe having a firearm saves lives. You don't always have to pull it out and shoot. No one even knows it's there, but the idea that it might be there is a deterrent. Here's some more data. There's a lot of gun control groups pushing all these laws, and I think they mean well. But one place where they've had a whole lot of success is California. It was brought up earlier, Kentucky versus California. Well, I'd rather be in Kentucky, and let me tell you why. And God bless those souls that were killed by a bad guy. God bless them. In California, for example, since 2010, their mass shooting rate per capita is 43% higher than Kentucky. That's data. It's not politics. It's data. And since 2010, 29% higher than the rest of the country. That was in 2010. Well, they passed a whole lot of gun control bills since then. In fact, one very similar to this in much of California. Despite falling over themselves to please gun control groups, since 2020, just a few years ago, since 2020, California's rate of mass shootings is now 276% higher than Kentucky, and over 100% higher than anywhere else averaged out per capita in the rest of the country. I don't know if that gun control is doing anything to save anybody's lives, but it sure does seem, the data sure does seem like it's making it less safe there. The facts show that more carry permits equals less crime, and it's a great equalizer between the sexes. I promised to mention this to my wife, because we talk about these subjects a lot. And I know many of you consider me to be a trophy husband. But it's just not so. My wife is way more impressive than me. And in addition to how impressive she is, she's little. She's 5 foot tall, 100 pounds when she's not pregnant. And she's beautiful. She's beautiful. When we were dating, she lived outside of D.C., and there had been the kidnapping and rape of a woman in her community that got reported on the news. I can't imagine the horror. Well, she was afraid getting out of her car, getting into her condo. She was afraid to go to work. She was afraid to jog because she's little. She told me back then that she wished she could have a carry permit. She couldn't. She didn't own a business. Wasn't in that protected class that Maryland had established that discriminated against her. In fact, if you Googled it, in Maryland, people would recommend you to hold your keys between your fingers on your way from your car to your condo, between work and your car, between the grocery store. Hold your keys between your fingers. That way you can use it as a weapon. The trouble is, this bill before us would disarm women in these types of situations. She told me that when she got her carry permit, being little, and being a woman who's a target in this culture, for the first time in her life, her words were that she felt safe to be in the world. Now, she's never used it. She's a better shot than me, I'll tell you that. But it gave her an equal hand to a predator. It gave her a shot to a predator. And for the first time in her life, she felt safer. The facts are that permit carry holders are the least likely people in America to commit a crime. It was mentioned earlier by the delegate from Baltimore County, we should study the rates. Well, I've got the rates. It's been studied extensively by the FBI and others. I think most of us know that there's a few bad apples among law enforcement, but the vast majority of them are fantastic human beings who put their life on the line every day to protect us. Concealed carry permit holders value that carry permit. They value the right that they have to carry their firearm for their own protection. And they are 1/12 the rate of law enforcement officers to commit a crime. They are among the safest people in your community. And we should really thank them for being willing to take on that responsibility to be there to protect others. Florida is the 26th state in America to allow Americans to carry firearms on their person for self-defense, and they don't even need to have a permit. 26 states in America do not require a permit as long as you are not a prohibited person, and you can have some safeguards like training and some other things that Maryland and other states do. The vast majority of America is safer than pro-gun control states. Bills like this make Marylanders less safe. When the Bruen case, I'm almost done, Madam Speaker. When the Bruen case, what it did was force states like California, New Jersey, New York, and Maryland to provide carry permits in the same way as Pennsylvania, the right-wing state of Delaware, Virginia, Maryland do it like they do it there. And the fear of the wild, wild west isn't carried out by lawful permit owners. It's always carried out by the bad guys. Always carried out by the bad guys. The bill before us violates our constitutional right with a very weak legal excuse. And as I mentioned, it will make us less safe. The result of the enactment of this bill would create more death at the hands of bad guys with a gun because there will be fewer good guys and gals there to stop them. Soft targets are what they like. Soft targets please the bad guys. Just look at the recent horrific shooting in Tennessee. Law enforcement reported that shooter that killed those poor children chose that school because it was a soft target. That shooter that created a massacre that spilled precious blood of innocent children and adults had cased up another school and put in writing that that school was protected, but settled on the other school because it was a soft target to carry out her massacre. Gun-free zones make people feel safer, but the data shows, and it's unequivocal, the data shows they're big, fat bullseyes for bad guys with guns. I understand the knee-jerk reaction. I understand that these things often sound good. It might make some people feel safer. But you're making America less safe by passing a bill like this that makes the good guy and gal with a firearm permit to carry not there when the bad person shows up. I urge a red vote. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Madam Speaker.